president and Mark Zuckerberg definitely have accepted one another's friend requests. To talk more about today's town hall and why the president needs Facebook, let's bring in the man who spent a lot of time at Facebook and literally wrote the book on the company. Joining us now from New York is David Kirkpatrick, author of The Facebook Effect and founder of the Techonomy Conference. David, welcome to Bloomberg West. So first of all, you also spent a lot of time with Mark Zuckerberg. You know him very well. He was wearing not just a jacket, but a tie as well. Is Mark Zuckerberg growing up?
Well, he is growing up, literally. I mean, he started this thing when he was 19, and he's almost 27, so yes. But he doesn't wear ties very often, and I doubt if he will start now. Although, in fact, the very reason that I think we're maybe having somewhat this segment is, you know, Facebook does need to be doing a lot more interaction with government going forward, given their scale, given some of their ambitions. So maybe he will be putting on a tie somewhat more often as he visits, you know, Washington, London, Brussels, even possibly Beijing, to try to talk to government leaders about what he's trying to do.
David, Cory Johnson here in San Francisco. Nice to see you.
Good to see you, Cory.
Is this kind of thing surprising to see the president at a place like Facebook, a company wasn't, let alone on the radar, hardly existed, you know, 6, 8, 10 years ago?
Well, there is no other place like Facebook, first of all, so I guess in that sense it's surprising. But, you know, he's an extremely tech-savvy president, you know, and that I'm impressed, to be honest. I don't think that he has the government behind him that's as tech-savvy as he is. He knows that Facebook was a significant factor in his election. You know, he mobilized social media quite effectively, including Facebook, during his campaign. He hasn't forgotten that. He also knows that young people are very largely the reason he got elected, and Facebook still skews quite young. So he's got a lot of good reasons to be at Facebook, and he also knows it's just an extremely efficient medium to get a broad message out to the American people. More than half of American adults use Facebook today.
That said, David, you actually don't think that President Obama is the politician who has used Facebook most effectively, do you? Tell us about that.
Well, I just think that he has not used it as well since he got elected as he did to get elected. I mean, it's also extremely difficult to do, to, you know, continue to mobilize your supporters once you're in office, and all the challenges of dealing with the exigencies of law, creating laws and working with Congress. This is tough stuff and often very slow and undramatic, and I don't think that Facebook has been utilized by him the way it was during the election. I still give Obama pretty high marks on balance as government leaders go. Another one who's extremely good with Facebook is David Cameron of the UK, who has also got a lot of familiarity and comfort with modern technology.
And I believe you've also been pretty complimentary of Sarah Palin's efforts to use Facebook as well, right?
Sarah Palin really is probably the American politician of all who has most effectively utilized Facebook. A lot of people who aren't her followers, and she has almost 3 million followers and fans on Facebook, don't realize that most, if not all, of her public statements, including the really famous controversial ones like calling the health care plan death panels, are made on Facebook first. She said death panels on Facebook. She puts all of her basic interactions with the public on Facebook first, and I think it's brilliant that she's done such a good job of accumulating almost 3 million people who really interact with her regularly. She has a staff that helps her do it, but she actually is on there a lot herself.
So obviously the president needs Facebook, but Facebook needs the president as well. Facebook's really stepped up its lobbying efforts in Washington. What does Facebook want, David?
Well, I don't know if Facebook needs the president per se, but Facebook really needs government, because there are a number of things about Facebook's business that really are going to force it to interact more and more actively with regulators and with governments. We've seen bills introduced recently in Congress that would significantly have privacy impacts on Facebook. Similar things are happening in the European Union, where even more stringent laws are being proposed that would seriously alter the way Facebook had to operate. You know, Facebook does two things that governments care about. One It's a repository of identity, which is something that governments historically thought was their job. And number two, it has this huge storehouse of data about citizens, and governments feel it's their obligation to protect the privacy of their citizens. So Facebook is going to have to explain itself more and more to government. It's going to have to deal with issues of regulation that are going to be proposed, some of which are going to be irrational, some of which may be reasonable. It's also going to have to, if they go into China the way they're currently being said to go into it, that's not certain, but there are rumors that are going to partner with Baidu and introduce a service that might not be connected to their U.S. service. They're going to face a lot of criticism among government leaders all around the world for doing that. They'll be said to have sold out. And at that point, having allies, maybe including the president, won't hurt.
David, what are Sheryl Sandbergs, the COO, what are her efforts going to be in all of this? What's her role?
Well, you know, when Mark hired her, one of the reasons he said he wanted to hire her was because she had so much government experience. And they talked a lot at that time about how leading Facebook was something like operating a government. You know, she had been Larry Summers' chief of staff when he was Secretary of Treasury, et cetera. But Sheryl is a business leader of Facebook. She's in charge of all the advertising operations, all the business operations. Mark focuses on product and strategy, and she focuses on making money. And he really delegates that to her very thoroughly. But they do talk a lot about these policy issues.
Obviously, privacy is going to be a huge issue going forward. We're now seeing Google getting increasing scrutiny from regulators about potentially being a monopoly. Do you think that down the line, Facebook could face the same problems?
Oh, absolutely. That's sort of what I was trying to suggest before. I mean, Facebook is not often referred to as a monopoly, even though it is. At the moment, that doesn't seem to bother too many people. But, you know, the exact same forces that have come in, you know, the headwinds that Google is now experiencing are going to be experienced by Facebook. There's no question. Facebook is just still such an amazingly rapid phenomenon that I think people haven't even figured out how to react to it yet. But governments are starting to.
David, which governments? I mean, you know, Sheryl Sandberg, when I first met her when she moved out here, having just left the Clinton administration and the Treasury Department, is this a Democratic company? Are those the extent of their connections, or are they trying to reach both sides of the aisle in their lobbying and maybe their fundraising efforts as well?
They definitely have a number of senior executives who are Republicans and who came out of the Reagan administration, so I don't think it's fair to call them a Democratic company. I think they are very careful at Facebook not to seem partisan in any way, even including in things like Egypt and Tunisia, not seeming to be on the side of the demonstrators. They want Facebook to be a neutral platform for their users, and that is always going to be their basic point of view.
Speaking of the Egypt thing, they managed that in a very deft sort of way. They took a stand saying they wanted to make sure they were available, but they also wouldn't let people post privately and maybe they hide their positions. Was that a politically guided smart or maybe not smart move, or was that just sticking to company fundamentals? I mean, you've been inside there in Palo Alto. You know the way those guys think. Were they thinking we do it our way and stick with it,
yes,
or were they thinking we've got to manage it based on the situation on the ground?
It was totally sticking to fundamentals and the basic belief of how the system has to operate, and not varying that despite the fact that there was this dramatic development in Egypt. And that's going to be the way they're going to continue to operate. Facebook requires you to use your real name. It's basic to the way it operates.
David, thanks a lot. I really appreciate you joining us. Old friend, glad to have you on the show. Another one. Emily?